Hi, I'm Anne Marie with Speak Confident English, and welcome to your Confident English Wednesday lesson. This is video number 2 in a 3-part series on how we use conditionals in real life so that you can also use them in your real life in English, adding variety and complexity to your speaking. So in this video, we're going to focus on the second conditional and what it helps us do when we communicate, what we can express. A few of those things that we're able to do are to talk about unlikely or even impossible future scenarios. If you remember in video 1, the first conditional helps us talk about likely situations and the probability, the likelihood of something happening. But now we're shifting focus to unlikely or impossible situations. We also use the second conditional to give advice and to imagine different futures. We kind of use it just for fun, trust me. And then at the end of this video, I'm also going to give you a tip for how to decide when to use the first or second conditional, because sometimes both could be correct. It depends on your attitude or your point of view. So let's get started with the second conditional in English. Let's start with an example. If I lived in the city, my commute to work would be shorter. If I lived in the city, my commute to work would be shorter. So I'm using my if, then the past simple, would, and the infinitive form. And changing those words from the first conditional helps us focus on the impossible or the unlikeliness. The reality is I live outside the city. I can't change that unless I want to move, but I don't want to. So I live outside the city, and that means I have a longer commute to work. But if I'm imagining an impossible situation, I could say, if I lived closer to the city, I would have a shorter commute. Let's take a look at another example. Perhaps I wish I had more time and I would love to exercise more or maybe participate in a marathon. So I could say, if I had more time, I would be able to train for a marathon. If I had more time, I could train for a marathon. So I'm using that same structure, but I'm expressing that something is unlikely in the future or it's impossible in the future because of my current situation. The reality is I'm just too busy right now and I cannot make time to train for a marathon. So those are two examples of how we can use the second conditional to talk about something that is impossible or unlikely in the future. Don't forget, you can always go to the online lesson to get more examples and more explanations of how we do that. The second one is super simple. All you need are 4 simple words. If I were you. If I were you, I would just be honest with your boss about what happened. If I were you, I would make time to train for that marathon. Those 4 simple words set up the ability to give advice, and we're using the second conditional. So if you just use those 4 simple words, if I were you, and you follow the structure that we need for the second conditional, then you'll have used it perfectly for giving advice to your friends, your colleagues, your family members, whoever it is that is looking for your advice. And third, we use the second conditional to imagine alternate future realities. These are impossible situations, but we just like talking about them. Honestly, sometimes these are just for fun. We use these kinds of questions to get to know each other, to start a conversation, to imagine different things. For example, a very common one is, if you were president, what law would you change? If you were president, what laws would you change? Or if you had 2 months to travel anywhere in the world and money was not an issue, where would you go? If you could travel for 2 months, where would you go? So we're imagining something different for our future, and I'm not joking, we sometimes do this just for fun. See, grammar can be fun. Now, one quick note on using would in the second conditional. I can also use might or could. I can replace it with one of those other modal words. There is a small change in the meaning of the sentence when I do that, and you can go to the online lesson to find out exactly what those little differences are, but let's look at an example to help you think about that. If the company improved their customer service, they would have more customers. Because I'm using the second conditional, I'm expressing the fact that I don't think it is likely that the company will improve their customer service. I'm expressing my attitude about the situation. But I could also say, if the company improved their customer service, they might have more customers, or they could have more customers. Make sure that you go to the online lesson to check out how those little changes in those words change the meaning ever so slightly in those sentences. And finally, I want to give you a little tip about how to decide between using the first and second conditional. As I said, there are times when both could be correct, but they express very different meanings and your attitude about something. So if you remember from video number 1, I talked about an example of giving a warning to someone. Imagine that you work for a company and your job is to make sure that customers pay their bills. So you might need to send an email that says, if you don't pay your invoice immediately, we will stop your service. So it's a warning, and it sounds likely that the customer won't pay. You're giving them a warning that they need to do something now if they don't want to lose their service. But let's imagine a little bit of a different scenario. Maybe you work at a banking company and your job is to bring new customers, new clients to the bank, and you want to let them know what your terms are, the rules, the regulations that you have for opening an account at your bank. Then you don't want to give such a strong warning to a new customer. You don't want to tell your brand new customer that you think they might not pay something in the future. So we would use the second conditional to give a much softer warning and say, I know it's unlikely, but if you stopped paying your bill, we would cancel your service in 3 days. So here I'm suggesting, I'm letting you know the terms or the regulations. I'm simply suggesting this is a very unlikely situation, but I have to let you know. So those two different scenarios require two different answers. One saying it's likely that we're going to cancel your service because we need you to pay that money now. And the other one is simply letting your brand new customer know, I know you won't do this. It's very unlikely, but it's just important for me to tell you that we would cancel your service if you didn't pay. So that's a quick little tip to help you think about which conditional should you use. You first want to think about, is this a real situation? Is it likely? And do you believe that the outcome will be likely or unlikely? And with that, congratulations, you've just finished video number 2 in this series on using conditionals in real life. Make sure that you go to the online lesson to get more examples and the opportunity to practice, and then move on to the final video where we'll talk about third conditionals. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week for your Confident English Wednesday lesson.